Hello, my name is Adam Krieger and I'm with Warren Township Youth and Family Services. But more importantly, I'm the current president of Healthy Communities, Healthy Youth. And I want to welcome all of you to the second annual HHY Back to School panel. The first panel was last year at the height of the lockdown and all the uncertainty of the upcoming school year. While we are still faced with some uncertainty and a resurgence in cases, our children are largely in the process of returning to in-person education. While we're still faced with some uncertainty, the goal of this workshop is to allow parents an opportunity to ask questions related to the unique impact of COVID, or to simply ask any question, any of those standard questions that all parents might ask as they're preparing their children to go back to school. And any kind of question around emotional health, social functioning, or the ability to adapt to the changes in their life. We're very excited to have with us this evening representatives from Woodland District 50, Gurnee District 56, and Warren Township High School District 121. We're also very excited to have representatives from Lake Behavioral Hospital in Waukegan and the Zacharias Center here in Gurnee. While this presentation is focused on Warren Township school districts, we welcome those of you with children outside of our community, and we are happy to have you here for our discussion. We've asked that each one of our panel members takes approximately 3 to 5 minutes to introduce themselves and to touch base on a topic that they believe is important as our kids are transitioning back into school. I anticipate this will take about 25 to 30 minutes. So somewhere around probably 6:30, we'll just jump into any questions or discussion parents wish to have. I'm asking that the questions for the panelists be submitted through the chat. I'll keep track of the questions. In that first 25, 30 minutes, again, I probably won't stop a panelist to answer a question in that moment, but what I'll do is we'll hold on to that question and then ask them as soon as we complete that portion of it. With that said, I'd like to go ahead and jump into get us started and introduce the first of our opening comments. First person I'd like to introduce is Tina Jerkasik from Woodland School District.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tina Jerkasik, and this is going to be my 31st year as a school social worker, and 28 of them have been at Woodland Intermediate School. So I have been there a long time. And I just wanted to say a few words about just teaching our children how to be their own self-advocates. When you're your own self-advocate, you can verbalize to others how you're feeling, express what you need. And I think this is just crucial in our current situation because everybody expresses their emotions differently. And some kids are really good at hiding anxiety, hiding their worries, hiding their fears. So I think it's really important to help our kids develop those skills and develop the problem-solving skills that sometimes goes along with that. A few ways to kind of help build these skills is to give them ownership of their problems. I think sometimes as parents, and I know I've been myself at fault for this, is sometimes we want to just jump right in and kind of solve the problem for them. And I think it's really important to listen to their concerns and their feelings, try to validate what you hear them say. Sometimes they might need some help recognizing what their feelings are and identifying and understanding all the emotions they're having. But I think it's really important to kind of give them ownership of that. So things like, it sounds to me like you're really worried about the situation at school that you're feeling and that your friends are upset with you. So just kind of verbalize it back to them to make sure you understand the situation, and then kind of help them think through solutions by just kind of asking them some guiding questions like, what do you think would make this situation better, or what would make you feel better? Have you ever solved a problem like this in the past, and how have you done that? Is there anyone you can go to get some more information if they're feeling worried or confused or scared about something and they don't understand what's expected of them? Who can they go to get that information and help? Kids need opportunities to practice being independent in this, but they may obviously need support at first, especially depending on their age. When I work with students and they have conflicts with others, or they're expressing certain emotions and feelings in a problematic situation, I always have them kind of practice with me, and we kind of role play and go through what they might say in a safe place. And then if they don't feel comfortable going out and doing it on their own, I offer to be there with them as support. But I really do try to help them take the lead and lean only on me if they need to. It's just a wonderful way to build confidence, and it's such a skill that's needed throughout their entire lives. So, um, yeah. So I don't.
That's perfect, Tina. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. A lot of practical guidance and advice there. Thank you so much. The next person up I'll have is Neil Hemmer from Zacharias Center.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Neil Hemmer. I'm the child and adolescent counselor at the Zacharias Center in Gurnee. I've been doing that for about a year now, but before that, I've worked with children since I was 15. They are my heart and my passion. Today, I will be talking about big emotions and anxiety. So I myself was diagnosed with OCD and anxiety disorder at 13. So along with my own skills, anxiety has been a passion of mine forever and ever. And I've seen it too often in children. And I think it's become almost to an unmanageable point with this pandemic and the changes in scheduling and home and back to school. So we're going to talk tonight about a bunch of healthy coping skills and ways that you guys can just give your kids space to breathe, right? And I think that's the most important part of anxiety, is giving your child the ability to verbalize it, right? And offer that safe space for them to be like, this feels uncomfortable. With big emotions are a huge passion of mine. I worked as a crisis counselor for 3 years before I was at the Zacharias Center. Crises are hard, right? And I think kids are in a constant crisis because they haven't really figured out how to handle their emotions yet. Normal emotions that you and I feel every single day feel cataclysmic to them, right? So my biggest piece of advice always is just to tell them it's okay that you're feeling this, right? It's okay that you're feeling this way, and it's okay that it feels really scary. I think children unfortunately get too caught up that they're feeling scared and that they're overwhelmed, and then it's so easy for them to shut down. So being able to give them that space, once again, just to feel those big feelings and offer them expressive options, right? Safe, expressive things to be doing with those big emotions has proved super useful in my work, right? Whether that's drawing or coloring or playing outside or spinning around in a circle a bunch of times, whatever it is that they feel most comfortable doing at the moment is important to let them do. I think that we as adults often want to control the big emotions because they seem out of control, but for them, it's just the same emotions that you and I feel every day, just in a smaller package. So it feels much bigger to them. So yeah, I can't wait to talk to you guys about this, and I hope that my advice and expertise is helpful.
Neil, thank you so much. Wise words: validate and to normalize the big emotions. Good. Thank you so much. Next, we will go to Jerry Wyman from Gurnee School District.
I'm Jerry Wyman. I work as a school social worker at Viking School. I've been a part of the Gurnee district for over 25 years as a social worker, and I've worked at all levels from pre-K all the way to 8th grade. I've also been a coach. I've been a wrestling coach there for more than 25 years too. So I've had the benefit of working with kids in an office and also working in a competitive arena as well. And so a lot of the skills that I've tried to impart on some of the kids can be also used in a sporting event as well. And so I've also been lucky enough to have 2 children that are at Woodland Intermediate. So I have a dual role where I'm not just a social worker, but I'm also a parent. So I definitely know what it's like as a parent, having kids deal with the pandemic and also have to return to school. And I want to give some practical advice on just the idea of kids that feeling anxious about returning to school in the pandemic. And I think other panelists are going to talk about some of these things, but I want to go ahead and just remind parents that every school has these 3 W's that we teach kids and we monitor kids on, and that is you have to wear that mask, you have to watch your distance, and then you also have to wash your hands, especially before and after you're having lunch. So those 3 W's are a part of every school district, and we've had school for the last 2 days. And my experience at Viking is kids have been doing that very well, and they've been responding very well to our prompts. The other thing that I wanted to mention is for those kids that are feeling anxious, and this is one of the things that I do in my coaching, is the idea of being prepared. Before you walk into the building, before you walk on that mat as a wrestling and face an opponent, you have to be prepared. And so a couple ideas that I have for kids that are anxious about their school day, say it's a late at night or early morning, is 3 ideas. Pick out some nice clothes. The nicer you're dressed, the better you'll feel. Pack something really good in your lunch. So have something to look forward to eat. So you're wearing nice clothes, you're pack something really good to eat. And then a real key thing is pick a buddy or pick a sibling or someone that you could pair up with and walk into that building. That really reduces anxieties. If you have a peer that everybody's going through the same thing, walking into that building together, it really overcomes a lot of those fears and anxieties that kids have when they go into a building. The final thing I want to mention, and I always plug this with every kid, is whether it be a sport or a club or band or a choir, join something. That is definitely going to make you a part of the school. It'll make the school year so much more fun. And believe me, we have a lot of mitigations in place. So regardless of the sport or the activity, we are going to keep your kids' safety number one. Number one thing is to keep them safe. So that's in essence kind of the overview of the points I wanted to make for how we're dealing with things here at Gurney 56.
Gary, thank you so much. That was great information. And so we'll go ahead with Megan Janecki. Sorry, I apologize if I got that wrong. From Lake Behavioral.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi. Like Adam said, my name is Megan. I'm a clinical social worker at Lake Behavioral Hospital. I've been here for about a year, and then I've also worked for the last kind of 10 years in different social services settings. So in residential treatment, in outpatient therapy, and crisis management at the Lake County Health Department. So I've kind of got a wide variety of services that I've been involved in Lake County and in some of the schools. And I think what I'm going to talk about today is the use of electronics and really the increase we've seen in the last year or so. And I think some of the concern families are having with the use of electronics. I think it was kind of forced in this last year because in the educational setting, the students have really had to use e-learning, but then also for their connection with their peers. This is the place where they were safely able to communicate with their peers, spend time with their peers and their friends. But I think there's a concern of just maybe like the overuse now of electronics and maybe the concern that students and individuals might be losing out on that connection time. So I think, our students are using it for connection, for games, for socialization. And I think there's a way to kind of limit some of the time that they're using and also put structure around the time that our students and our kids are using electronics. But then to also be mindful as parents that we don't want to completely take it away because that's where some of our students and some of the children are still kind of getting that connection with their friends. But if there's structure and limit on time around it, that can also be really helpful in kind of creating a structure around using our electronics. But then I think it's also important that if we're taking some of that time away, we're also adding something to their kind of routine of the night. So we're not just taking something away that could cause some anxiety because they've become so accustomed and so used to using it in the last year. So maybe that means going for a walk as a family, or maybe that means playing a board game or adding something that's going to enhance their daily schedule. And then I think also too, modeling for our kids, like how are we using our electronics? Are we being mindful of our own screen time as we're sitting around the dinner table or we're out to dinner? So I think both those things can go a really long way in kind of being mindful of the electronic use that we're having. And I think too, if some of our kids are having a difficult time managing their feelings, like I know Neil had talked about big feelings, like if we're seeing some kind of like anxiety surrounding limiting the use of electronics, maybe that's exploring other, kind of services in the community of ways that those anxieties can be addressed in a safe way. I hope if there's any other questions, I can be of help.
That was great, Megan. Thank you so much. I know that topic will come up more as we continue our conversation. Next, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Nate Karasek from Warren Township High School. Nate, remind me, which campus are you at?
I'm at the Old Plain campus
You're at the
currently.
Old Plain. Wonderful. Great. Thank
Yep.
you.
My name is Nate Karasek. Thanks, Adam. And I am currently a dean at the Old Plain campus. And what my responsibility is I'm in charge of a student services team that, in fact, I'm the lead dean for the district. But I'm in charge of a student services team that consists of a couple of counselors, a social worker, and a psychologist. And we work together to problem solve, to make sure that we're removing barriers for students who may come across some of the very issues that have been discussed a little bit earlier from the other panelists. Deb Perry is going to be kind of working with me on this. She's also a dean at the Old Plain campus. So we're going to kind of tag team this a little bit, especially when questions come, and she'll be able to answer some things that I may not be thinking of, or she'll maybe chime in to add something I'm missing. What I'd like to talk a little bit about is schedules and routines. I think it's important to create some consistency in students' lives. We saw over the pandemic time, especially when students were fully remote, is that they were having a hard time trying to manage their time on their own. And now, as we've gotten back into school, because we started school a week ago, where the first week we started out kind of slowly. We were working on some social emotional skills with our students. We were rolling out a program called the Warren Way, talking about respect, resiliency, and engagement. Now and always is what we're talking about. And we spent the entire week going through a lot of what each of those words means and how they can be used within the school setting. And we're going to be continuing doing that over the next couple of weeks as well. But along the lines of that is we've also seen students come back into the building. And I want to kind of reiterate what Gary was saying regarding the use of masks and things like that. We've noticed that students have really been listening and complying and helping out to make sure that everyone is wearing their masks consistently, so that we're in an environment where everybody's feeling respected regarding one another's health. But outside of the school day, because during the school day, obviously, their students have their day scheduled out for them. They have the different periods of the day. They have the classes that they're going to. Their teachers are talking to them during the class time about activities they will be doing to engage in their learning. So all of that's already done for them. That's the easy part as far as scheduling goes. But it's outside the day, which is either after school or before school, where students and families sometimes struggle. So some of the tips that actually Deb and I did a presentation earlier this year, or actually it was last year, when we had students in the building talking about some what we call executive functioning skills and schedules that go along with it, is how do we prepare students to make sure that they're able to find the time and able to find the desire to kind of accomplish some tasks that are outside of the school day, which during the pandemic was a lot of it because they were home remote. Now, so this will apply for everyone now when they get home. Something that we think that is important is creating structure. That's extremely important. And I think it's important for families to work together to try and figure out what the structure is for each one of their children. I have 4 kids of my own, and they all went through the remote learning for a period of time, and then now they're transitioning back to school, but each one has different responsibilities. I have 2 students or 2 kids who played hockey. Well, one's graduated high school now, so he's moved beyond that, but last year they played hockey, and my other son works. So trying to balance all that was kind of a difficult thing. So we had to work with each one of them to figure out what each one of their individual schedules would be. So that involves a lot of communication, where you talk with your kids and you understand what they need to have done. So talking to them to figure out, okay, what do you need to get done today? Or what do we have as a weekly thing that we need to do? And then putting that on a calendar to try and figure that out. And I think even listing and going through and listing all the things that you as each student or kid is a child is responsible for is a good activity that you and they can do, so that you know that these are things that they're responsible for. And then you could start determining time periods and how long it's going to take to accomplish each one of those activities, because there's times that, well, first of all, everyone needs to eat. So that's something that you can schedule, and then you should be sleeping. And then there's other activities that we do, like getting ready for bed and waking up in the morning, and like what I think it was Gary who was talking about, picking out and finding some important clothes and being prepared. So those are like looking for those things. When are you going to spend the time to do something like that? So looking at times when you're going to schedule your free time, how long it's going to take for you. Are you going to all eat together as a family, or are you going to just have different meals set out for families? Homework, what time or where are you going to do that? How much time are people going to need to do that? If a student or a person has a job, I know a lot of younger kids don't have jobs, but they are involved in activities outside of school. And then having a consistent time when going to bed. That is extremely important. We know that for a fact. There's a lot of research out there that shows that young people and even growing young adults really need their sleep. And if they don't get it, it actually is detrimental for brain function, and it's hard for them to learn. So it's extremely important for students to get a lot of sleep. So scheduling your time and then sticking to that and being consistent with it, so that you can find the time to go to bed at a good time period. And even looking at some future assignments for the older students that you can kind of chunk together and figure out what you can do to lead up to the final project or assignment or test, so that you're not cramming the night before and not getting the sleep before the next day. Now, one real quick last thing, I know I've been talking for a little while. The tools that you can use to kind of do that, I know not everybody's tech savvy, but most people have a phone, and using a calendar on a phone is helpful. Using the alarm on the phone is helpful. Even using a timer on there to determine like how long you do things. Or if you're into not that, you can use a calendar, and actually you hang on the wall calendar and kind of put things on there. So that's kind of it. I don't know if you have any more, Deb, that you'd like to add to that. I know it was a mouthful.
No, you covered it. You covered it all. My big thing was trying to help them find what tools work best for them is the big thing. And sometimes, smaller students and even, younger adults don't even understand the capabilities they have in their phone. I mean, I know we talked earlier about limiting our technology, which is important. But for some students, that might be a great way for them to organize, using their calendar in there, setting alarms, due dates, things like that. Otherwise, paper and pen, a hanging calendar in the home for the family, whatever works. The important thing is finding out what might help that student be more successful and organized with their schedule every day.
Great. Deb and Nate, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's wonderful. And what we'll do now is, I think I've hit everybody. So what we'll do now is we'll go into general discussion. And so please I'm encouraging those who are with us as attendees to please, send us any questions you have. I do have some questions that came in advance that I can begin by asking. I also want to let the panelists know, to be clear, that I know, some of you came here with a specific topic that you wanted to hit on, but please know everybody's welcome to jump in on any question that comes up based on your thoughts. And my hope is that we have a wonderful discussion. I am going to ask a quick question, and this may apply. This question probably will apply more to the school staff, and a little bit to Jerry. Probably Tina won't have quite as much to offer, but the high school, I know you have been in school for a week now. Just real quickly, from those who have kind of begun to see what's coming in from the kids, from our community, are we seeing any trends? Are there, are you seeing any issues that you would say, boy, really noticing this issue's coming up, or seeing these kids come down for social work services, or we're getting calls from parents? Any trends that you want to share with us that you've seen so far?
I think the biggest trend has been the concern about safety. We've had a couple of instances where we've had to send out letters, which is common because schools have to report to families if anyone within the school community has tested positive for COVID. And as a result of that, I think it raises the anxiety for people. Unfortunately, we also experienced within our community a loss. One of our students had passed, so that was kind of coupled with some other things, and there was some confusion that came out of that. But other than the fact that parents are concerned about their children being at school, we're seeing the same kinds of in-person issues that we would deal with on a normal basis. So far, there hasn't been, everybody, students have some anxieties about being in school, schedules, getting to know people. We had done some surveys last year to find out what our student population was feeling, and a lot of what we found from those surveys was that they weren't being connected, or they felt a disconnection with their friends and families, obviously because they're not seeing them in person. And then they had some higher anxieties just in general. I think that being able to see students, each other, has really been helpful for a lot of our students. At the very beginning, they were kind of standoffish, not really sure, but now they're getting back into the routine of school. They're getting more comfortable being with one another. Last year, we had a real small group of students, although we were in person. Our percentage of students who came into the building was relatively small compared to our population. And it was a little different because when we were in places where students were allowed to interact, such as a study hall where they can talk, and we kind of encouraged them to interact with one another, they weren't. They were distanced, and they were quiet. They weren't really engaging with one another. That's not as much. I haven't seen that as much this year. It's mostly students are interacting with one another, and they're trying to get back into the routine of somewhat normal school.
Great. Anybody else? Oh, Jerry.
Yeah, I'd like to elaborate on what Nate was just saying, and that is, in the last year, I think students have forgotten what it's like to be a student. And so a lot of times, they're entering the building, and not only are they forgetting the idea of, there's a certain schedule to follow, but I'm finding their schedules on the ground because they misplaced them. And they just need to get trained again. And like, to give you an idea, the kids that are entering third grade really have the social and emotional ability of a first grader, because that whole second grade year, socially and emotionally and being a student was wiped out. So what I would say is it's like a forgetfulness of what it's like to be a student, and overall just the immaturity, because they're just not used to being these bigger bodied kids that are suddenly expected. Hey, you've got to get yourself from point A to point B. You got to remember your schedule. You got to remember all the things that you got to take to class. And so I think that, we're looking at a group of kids that, because they lost that year, they've lost a year of social emotional maturity, and they've forgotten a lot of what it's like to be a student.
Can I pick up on that last point that Jerry made? And I ask anybody, because this actually reflects a couple of questions that I did receive in advance. And anybody else is welcome to also jump in on this, Megan, Neil, anybody who wants to, is what can parents do to help their kids? And again, I know it varies by age, but just some general thoughts as what parents can help to do for those kids that are seemingly kind of fell behind socially. I can tell you at the counseling services here at Youth and Family, that's been a big issue, is parents who are very concerned about their kids' isolation because the kids have just sort of lost contact. They're not socially engaged the way they have been in the past. Any sort of guidance or suggestion for parents around how to encourage and support their kids as they kind of get re-engaged socially and kind of build those maturity skills or those social skills? Any thoughts on that?
I know, I think I don't know if it was Jerry who said get involved. I know we're talking at Woodland, what kind of intramurals can we offer? Coming up with a lot of creative ideas. I would say that that's a great way, because it's like a structured group where they can get the adult guidance, you know, and get that socialization at the same time, being around the other kids and learning how to interact and work in groups. And then sports. I mean, I know that was a great avenue for my son all of last year. He does volleyball and baseball. So I think sports, finding something that interests them, that they can get involved with and be a part of a team.
I'd like to reiterate and build on that too. Getting involved at school is important, or even activities outside of school. I could say that all through last year, two of my sons were playing hockey. So being able to get out and be with people that have similar interests was huge. Interacting with them and something that they enjoy doing was a really big deal. I know not everybody is into sports. So at the high school level, at least, if there's any parents of high school students in our audience here, we have a lot of opportunities currently where students can get involved in different clubs. We just had our MSA, which is our Muslim Student Association, that met today, and anybody can be part of that. We have a Schuler program where students they met today and did some things. And I mean, we have art club and gaming club, which is not online gaming, but like board game kind of stuff. So those are some of the things. Plus we have all of our sports. And I think that when and I don't want to say push, but I'm going to say push, because you kind of got to get them out there and encourage them strongly to get back with their friends. And my personal, one of my children, he's a gamer, which is kind of going against the technology piece, because he was on there all the time. And it was something that was difficult for our family, because he was on a screen all day and then was on a screen in the afternoon. But then I can't remember, maybe it was Megan who was talking about this, where we tried to get him to reduce that, but then we realized that was a huge piece of his life, or that was his social interaction. So we've helped him develop, like we helped him, encouraged him to get a job. So now he has a job. So he's getting out in the community doing that. And then he decided that he was going to pick up playing the bass. So because of his job, he was able to buy a bass guitar. And as a result of that, he's posting that kind of stuff online or wherever he's posting his stuff. And then he ended up connecting with some friends at school, and now he's like, they're doing a garage band thing. He's never played one before, but he's learning as he goes. But like, those are the things that we've encouraged him to do. And we're like, okay, although he's 16, he doesn't have his driver's license yet. And my wife and I have committed to being his chauffeur. We don't want to drive everywhere, but it's just a sacrifice that we've committed to that's going to allow him to interact face to face, which personally I think is extremely important for him over what we're doing here with a Zoom call. And not that this isn't valuable, but I do believe that that being face to face with people is extremely important.
I'm going to add on to that even more, but we're going to keep adding on. I think variety is the spice of life, right? And I think that's like probably the oldest saying in the book or something. But one thing I think my parents did really well, and I think that many of you can agree, it's important to not only push your kids, but ask them, right? Have a conversation with them about what do they want to try, why do they want to try it, all those kind of things, and encourage the differing abilities and interests and whatever. It's so cool to hear that the schools are offering so many different extracurriculars, and it's important to just go out and try anything, right? And one of the things I try to model for my clients and any kid I interact with is not being embarrassed to fail, right? That is the deepest insecurity I think of all of us, is to fail at whatever we're doing, but that's okay. Right? It's okay to try something. It's okay to not like it, and it's okay to fail at it. Right? But you should try it. You should try it anyway. One of my favorite sayings is get weird with it. Right? You have to try all these weird niche things until you find whatever it is you're really passionate about. So I think, bass guitar is awesome. I think gymnastics is awesome. I think football is awesome. I think video gaming is awesome. Trying all these different things will lead to not only a richer, but more expansive social life. And the social emotional learning that goes with trying a variety of things is invaluable.
Wonderful. Is there anybody else has anything to add on to that? We'll kind of continue along this sort of same theme, but anything else? So we've had a couple of questions around the specifics of this isolation and when it becomes clinical versus my kid's just a little bit nervous. Does anybody want to add something to that in terms of when is it actually, a clinical issue? I mean, when should they start really thinking about, okay, my kid should be seeing somebody, getting some kind of services? And any thoughts on that? Any guidance that you'd like to offer parents around when to take that next step if they're really concerned?
I'd like to give you a little background on how we tried to narrow down who were the kids that we really needed to reach out to help. Every year we do a universal screener. And I know other schools do this as well, and they have a list of questions. Last year, when we did the universal screener, we found that over 60% of our kids were anxious. And on a normal year, those kids might have required services. But last year was not a normal year. So what we ended up doing was kind of had two columns. One is if you fell in that group of 60% of kids that were really anxious. And the other category was if you did not have a trusted adult in your life. And I'm sure, Zachariah could speak of this, and that is if you don't have a trusted adult. What I mean is it doesn't have to be a parent. It could be an aunt and uncle. It could be a pastor. It could be a coach. It could be anybody who is an adult. If you don't have that trusted adult in your life, then you know what? We're going to reach out to you and we're going to try to find someone. It could be a social worker. It could be a fellow teacher. It could be somebody else. But those were the kids that we really focused a lot of our attention on. I don't know what this year is going to hold, but I certainly hope that our group of 60% of kids or more slowly decreases. But that trusted adult, if you don't have that, that's a big red flag.
I know one of the things when I talk to parents is if it's something that we can just work through and they're anxious, but they are still going to school or still kind of functioning, going to family, and relatives' house, like over COVID when there were the restrictions, and they just had this anxiety and were a little worried and maybe were expressing it a little bit, then, we just give them the support either through parents or maybe touching base with the social worker. But we had some students last year that stopped doing those things. They didn't want to go to a relative's house that they always used to love to go to. So a definite change in behavior, and what was restricting them from doing things that they used to enjoy, and they're stopping themselves from doing it either because of fear or because they just don't have the energy. I'm sorry, I apologize for my dogs barking. So that's where, when it gets to the point where it starts really interfering with their, everyday social interactions, ability to kind of, do what they have to do for school, get work done, and they just, don't feel like doing anything, or, their affect and their demeanor has just changed, where they just start withdrawing from, or on the opposite, getting really irritable all the time over little things. That's where I kind of, how much of an impact is it having on their lives, where I start to talk about either seeking an outside therapist, or obviously if there's more bigger concerns being expressed, looking at some other, options.
Yeah, in terms of, things your child also isn't doing, and I guess it depends on the age, but yeah, I look for activities of daily living, right? Are they still eating their favorite foods? Are they still showering? Are they getting up at an appropriate time? All those kind of things that would come with baseline. If they're, not doing those things, or forgetting to do those things, or maybe putting those things off, that would be a big red flag to me, right? There's a million reasons why someone would isolate clinically, but and along with passions, right? Even if your child is sitting inside all day and playing Fortnite or whatever children are playing these days, if they stop playing that, right, and they're just sitting in their room staring at a wall, that's concerning.
Thank you. I'm actually going to make a little transition, because I want to take what you just kind of where you left off at, Neil, and I am actually going to kind of put Megan on the spot a little bit here, because we have a question kind of related to that issue, particularly for kids where it seems like the only coping they have is video games. And one of the questions I had sent to me, and we can generalize this question, but it's specific. My teen uses video games to manage his stress and mild anxiety. Should I pull him off the devices with the start of the school year? So I think the question I hear that's coming up is often this question of about kind of how extreme do you need to go when your kid's not doing what they should be doing, or they seem overly absorbed and overly dependent on video games. I know every case is unique, but Megan, any general guidance or thoughts for parents who are really in the middle of that struggle?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern would be if you take them off completely all at once, you're really taking from them the ways they've learned how to manage those feelings of anxiety or sadness or depression or whatever it might be for that individual. So I think if you're going to put structures and limitations around the electronics, you've also got to add something to their repertoire of coping strategies. And so that might be exploring different options, exploring things that they might not have tried before. But I would be hesitant to taking them off completely all at once. And I think it would be a conversation, sitting down and talking about what it's going to look like before just ultimately saying okay, no more Fortnite anymore, no more Minecraft anymore. Because I think that can set our kids into kind of a state of shock, and they might not have something else that they're able to use for coping, or maybe that's their mode of communication where they're able to talk to their peers and their friends. So I think it's seeing both sides of it as yes, that we don't want our kids for 12 hours a day just sitting on Fortnite, staying up all night, but that we're also acknowledging that this is one of their interests. This is maybe where they've learned to kind of communicate with people, and being mindful when we're setting kind of that structure and maybe time limits in place for that electronic use.
Do you have any guidance? And I know this is a tough question to overgeneralize again, but do you have any guidance about like how much is too much? Very often parents will even ask us and ask that question of, okay, well, my kid's spending 2 hours every day, 3 hours. Is there any general guidance that you've gone by that you have found helpful or effective?
I think like I've seen it be effective too, of having maybe some different guidelines between like weekdays and weekends. So maybe, especially like last year when our kids were on electronics more for e-learning, maybe that Monday through Friday, like our weekdays, there was a more limited time, and the weekends we were a little bit more flexible. But I don't know. I think it's hard to say hard and fast, like a time limit. And I think it's really based to individually what each kid is going through. I don't know, do any of the other panel members, have you guys hard and fast times?
I can speak from that as a parent standpoint. We did that. We actually set up our network so that there were time limits for our son, the one who was the gamer. And we realized, as I think a huge piece is the communication with them about what they're doing. And you learn a little bit about what and why. Initially, my wife and I a different opinion a little bit on this. She's more of no technology. We're not doing this. Technology is the evil devil that's going to come and ruin our world, which you can have your own opinions about that too. But I was more of, okay, well, there's reasons that he's doing this. He's like what's going on behind all of that. So once we found out that, for some of his games, they take some time. It's not just like what I used to do when I was growing up playing Pac-Man, and you have like a couple of, you're eating some globs on the screen and then you get eaten by these little ghosts and then the game's over. These are more, he was involved in some more gaming where it's like there's stories and things like that take a little bit more time. So just being kind of sensitive to that. And then throughout that, we realized that that was a lot of his social interaction too. But what we did determine was that like there's a cutoff time. This is the time that you are done. With him, for us, it was 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock, you're done. You have to, your computer is shutting off. You no longer have access to the internet for any of your devices at that time. Plus, we've also put in like a time limit. So he's got his own profile, and he's only allowed a certain amount of time for all of his activities. So we've had to adjust that a little bit depending on how much homework he's had or he has to use his computer for. So that also helps with his time management. He's an older student. I mean, he's a junior now. So he should be better at a lot of the time management pieces, because he can then, determine how much time is it going to take for him to do his homework. And then how much time does he get to do for gaming and things like that. So there's still times when we have to curtail some of that so that the time management piece is there. But I think if you're fitting other things in and it's not affecting them, that's kind of where you have to determine how much. And in my opinion, coming from like a parenting standpoint.
I think the thing that you're touching on is if it affects productivity and it affects your sleep, then you got to start putting limits on a kid. And I think that should, every kid's different. Some kids could game for an hour and that's enough. And some kids game for 12 hours and that's not enough. But if it affects their sleep, it affects their productivity, that's where you need to put some limits on the kid.
And I would even add one more component to that. How is it affecting their interaction within your family unit? Like how is that person, are they trying to escape from your family? Because that was some of the issues that we discovered, is that he wasn't getting along with his siblings. So that's something we had to address as a family. So, how is he interacting with you as a parent? How is he interacting with, or she is interacting with other brothers and sisters if they have any? So like what's determining that and all that too.
Let me, one of the questions actually, I just actually had a client or somebody I was doing an intake with today ask me about, and I'd love to get your feedback on this question. Also came up in one of the in one of the questions we had prior to this presentation, and that is any thoughts or feedback on that kid who is already showing a lot of difficulty in structuring their time. This was in an intake. A parent said, last year my kid had all this flexible time and they were at home and it was just kind of, in a sense, it was almost easy. But now they're back into the, regular going to school and having to come home. Does anybody have any cardinal rule or go-to that you think is particularly effective for parents who need to help their children better schedule their time as they've gone back to a more traditional leaving house kind of schedule? Any quick thoughts on that, on how to help parents help their children better schedule their time?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead first.
No, I was just going to say part of it is what Nate and I talked about earlier is maybe sitting down and talking with your student, with your child about what it is that they think they have to do. What is in their schedule, and within that schedule, you have your school schedule. Okay, once you come home, what does that schedule look like, and where can you schedule breaks, so to speak, or time to just kind of relax, to chill? And what does that time look like, and how much of that time is given, based on what needs to be done throughout the evening or even in the morning time or even on the weekends? I think it's important that they understand that it doesn't have to be go, go, go all the time. Even when they get home, it is okay. We even tell our high school students, and I have two. I have a junior high student and a elementary school student. But even, do X amount of work, 15 minutes of your work. You know what? Take a 5-minute walk around the house, or go to the bathroom, or come down and get something to drink. Their attention span is low as it is. So at least it breaks up the monotony, and it helps give them, even whether it's a movement break or just a break from whatever work they're working on. So having that schedule at home, but sitting down and talking about, okay, so what is it that you have to do? And then as a parent, looking at, all right, well, what is it that I want them to do? And then trying to come to, talking to your student and your child about that, and finding out where can you find that commonality or where you can both get something done, so to speak, or what it is you want done, is something that I would suggest.
That's such similar thoughts. I was going to say, so one thing that I always tell my clients, so for those of you who don't know what the Zacharias Center is, it's a sexual abuse center in Lake County. So all of my work is with trauma, right? And something that I always tell my clients to do, since they're doing such tough work at home, right? I give them homework for their therapy. I tell them to reverse engineer their time. Where are your breaks going to be? And then build on that, right? Design your breaks, design what your breaks are going to look like, right? How are you going to refill yourself? And then design your day around that. When are you going to do your homework? When are you going to have time for yourself? How are you taking care of yourself? When are you going to do the things your parents want you to do? Right. All those kind of things we schedule all the time. And yeah, I mean, the work that I do is not work that people want to do. Right. So, and no one wants to do homework. No one wants homework on top of their homework, all these things. So yeah, I have them look towards the end goal first and then design all their activities around that.
That's a great suggestion. The other thing that I think is important to understand is that when you do schedule some of the times where you are doing the work, is that you have to anticipate that you might have interruptions, and it's okay to have interruptions. Like, for example, Tina had her dog barking, and I'm not trying to pick on you or anything, but if you are scheduling during a homework time and you're the only one that's there and your dog needs to go out, well, that's an interruption that you need to take care of. And it's okay to interrupt your time to go take care of that little thing. Or, you have a parent that wants to come home and talk to you about whatever your day was, or something like that. You just have to understand that those things are going to happen, and you can anticipate those. But I think Neil was talking about something that's important as well. Being firm with what you need to get done. Being a parent or a guardian or someone in charge of a younger person is a difficult thing always. Well, not always. I mean, there's a lot of joy to it, but you have to stay consistent and firm. And it's not always a fun job as a parent to make sure that your child is staying on schedule. I think that's important to understand as well, is that as a parent, you kind of have to consistently continue to do and make sure that they're staying on schedule, even though they may say that they're going to say some things to you and resist. That's part of them growing up and asserting their own personalities into things too.
Anything else from anyone? Okay, let me jump on to another question. I thought this was a really interesting one I got from a parent. And this one was referring to a teen, but I could also see it occurring in younger children. And Neil, this kind of ties into your bailiwick, which is trauma. Okay, so my teen has become much more pessimistic and negative over the past year or so. He wasn't like this in the past. Obviously, I'm assuming she's referring to pre-COVID and stuff. What can I do to help? Now, I know it's a really big topic and obviously very dependent on unique individual situations, but any thoughts for parents that are seeing where maybe their kid has become more pessimistic, more fearful about the world? I know we've talked a little bit about anxiety, but any additional thoughts on how to kind of combat pessimism or negativity with their children?
I'm going to let someone else go first because I have like a billion thoughts on this subject. So I feel like we're all waiting to hit unmute, but
I also have a few things that pop to my head. One of them being, I think that goes back and speaks to when it becomes a clinical issue. If we're seeing kind of major changes in personality and how our kids are seeing the world and how they're communicating the world, I mean, I do think that might be a time where they may need someone else to kind of check in with them and explore where those feelings are coming from. And then another thought I had was, I think it's also important for us as parents to be mindful about what we're talking about and how we're communicating, seeing the world in front of them. Because yes, these last year and a half, 2 years have been very difficult on our kids. It's been very difficult on us as well. And so I think it's important that the things we're saying, the things we're communicating, the things we're modeling, while we're doing those things, we're being mindful of what our kids are hearing, because they're going to base a lot of their opinions, maybe not so much the teenagers, but I mean, our kids are going to base some of their opinions and their attitudes on what ours are. So maybe just also being mindful where we're having some of those maybe deeper conversations about those things.
You know, one thing I want to mention is over the summer, I spent a little bit too much time looking at the news, and I became the grumpy old man of the family. And so I've realized that, and I guess this goes for any person, you just got to limit what creates the pessimism. So if it's a certain person that sets you off, or read the news, or the stupid alerts that we get on our phone about something just happened, I think we just got to limit all those alerts and things that put you in that mood, you know? So I kind of talk with kids about this as far as, you know, if there's a certain kid that you don't get along with, the best way of dealing with it is try your best. Just try not to spend too much time with that kid, or try to find, you know, the people that you really enjoy spending time with. And, you know, this might not be the forum, but it's a faith thing. If you can tap into somebody's faith, that would definitely alleviate a lot of pessimism as well.
I mean, I think I focus with kids on what you can and cannot control, because sometimes those things that we cannot control are the things that are bothering us the most. And I think sometimes just being able to let go that this is not anything we have any control over. We just have to kind of accept it. You know, we don't have to like it, but, you know, not to dwell on those things. And if there are things that within our control that are bothering us or upsetting us, what can we do to change those things? And that's helped a lot of kids, because, you know, sometimes they just get so wrapped up in those things and they have no control over them. And it's, you know, them just recognizing that, yeah, I don't have control over this. So let me focus on something I do, and, you know, kind of change my mindset, and focus a little bit too on gratitude. What is going well? What things are good in your life? And just reminding them of those things, I think, can shift their mood just a little bit.
I would also explore it from a curiosity standpoint, right? And I do this with all my kids, because what has happened to them is horrible, right? And so there's there's no putting a bright spin on anything my clients have been through. So I think pessimism is an uncomfortable thing for all of us, right? No one wants to look on the downside of things, and no one wants to be around someone who's always looking on the downside of things, right? But yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to echo what everyone else says. Why? Right? Why are you looking on the downside of things? Are you, you know, ingesting something, whether it's through media or your friends or just the world around you, that's making you feel this way all the time? And then again, if it's not happening in your direct life, yeah, you got to, you know, narrow that view from macro to micro and say, okay, well, like right here, right now, life is good. I think mindfulness is really important when it comes to pessimism, because it's very easy to just be like, man, things stink. That's true. There are lots of bad things in the world, right? And there are no upsides to a global pandemic, right? There's really no upside to lots of things. But when you sit down and you say, why am I thinking that way? Right? And you think about what are the upsides. I keep a gratitude journal myself every single night. And I think it's an excellent practice for even our youngest kids to say, name one thing that went good today. Right. And then unmet needs. Right. And I think unmet needs are so easy to overlook, especially with kids, because they have so much on their plate already. Right. So I think something that we overlook all the time is, what aren't we meeting for you? Are your emotional needs being met? Are your social needs being met? Are your food needs being met? Are your exercise needs being met? Are your intellectual needs being met? Are your creativity needs being met? Right? There's so many things that we as adults do, right, naturally, because we've learned it over years and years and years. But kids, these things slip by and we're just like, oh yeah, that's right. That need of yours isn't being met. So, and once again, I think that just pulls perfectly full circle to the exploratoriness of it, right? Ask your children why they think that way. I think you'd be surprised by the answers you get.
That's great. Thank you for those. I really appreciate those comments on unmet needs. Right. And I think one of the things that I heard a lot of you getting at is this idea that you really have to check in with the children. You really have to check with your children, find out what's going on in the world without judgment, and really hear what it is that maybe is absent. And it's funny, as you were talking, one of the things I try to do with kids is when I work with kids, I often try to just ask them the simple question, what brings you joy. And I try to sort of explain the difference between just having fun. I mean, there are things that are fun, but what actually brings you joy, a true sense of well-being. And I think one of the things that I have found in doing counseling is during this COVID period, even still today to some degree, not as much, of course, as last year, but there is people are functioning from a sense of deprivation. And when we function from deprivation, we're very focused on what is absent versus what we have. And so I'm really trying to get kids who have, they're just kind of existing to really start to think about what actually brings me a sense of well-being and joy. So good, good. I've got a few more questions, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of see where we're at. We're going to go between about 7:15 to 7:30 as kind of being our end time. So depending upon the questions we have, but I have just a couple more questions. And then, of course, if any of you have anything particular that you want to say, one of the things that did come up in a question I had from a parent, and this one I will be asked probably is going to apply mostly to the schools. And this again may vary by age, but the question did come up, I had a question from a parent whose child has not again had historically any problems, is coming home with some emotional issues. And the parent was just kind of asking, when is it appropriate to tell my child to seek out help from a school social worker, or when should I seek out? This is probably a parent who's not familiar with things like 504 plans and IEPs. And again, my guess is these are kids. This is probably a child who's not necessarily at that point. But any guidance from the staff in terms of what parents should say to their kids about maybe seeking out help from social work or any other services available at the school. Any thoughts on that from the school staff?
I can go ahead and jump in. I've had several parents. We haven't started school, obviously, but I've had several parents, especially of the students who never returned last year and were in remote the entire year. And they had some anxiety anyway. So they, called me up, and, I'm meeting with a couple, introducing them. I've always told parents that, and teachers, I did a workshop with several teachers this year too, just to normalize that feeling of anxiety and nervousness, that everybody feels it. I feel it on the first day all the time, teachers do as well. And the more they can hear you, kind of talk about it, and it's okay, and that there's, I spoke with several kids today, and one kid's like, I'm excited, but then I'm kind of worried, or I'm excited and nervous. And I'm like, yeah, that's, that's how probably 99% of the kids are feeling, excited and nervous, and, I'm always willing to consult with parents, talk to them, introduce myself to students, check in with them. We don't necessarily start seeing them for social work until it seems to be more of an issue, and like I said, interfering more with their academics. But I'm more than happy to check in and out with kids, to give them some strategies, some quick, last year when we were remote, I sent some resources that were online that I had made. So I'm more than willing to share those with parents, share them with kids, just to give them those coping skills that they can use, and then check in with them to see, like, how is it working? And then, we kind of just follow up and see if are things getting better, because I would say most of the time, and this is what I'm anticipating, that I think within a month, I think kids are going to get back into the routine of things, most of them. And the ones that need some extra support, then we'll be looking at how we can, add some things into their schedule at school to help them.
I could speak more about what K-8 looks like with social work in a situation like this. And what we've created many years ago with the PBIS framework is there's different tiers. A tier 1 support is all students. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what that support looks like. So if a parent does have a concern about a child, we try our best to start with the tier 1 supports. One of the things that Viking Schools instituted this year is an advisory. An advisory is where every student is assigned to a teacher, and it's a smaller group. It's not a homeroom. It's an advisory where they do social emotional, goal setting, second step, and a variety of other different talking and communication skills that kids are working on. And it meets every day for 20, 30 minutes a day. And so that is one of the bases we have in our tier 1 support. And that's where a kid is able to get some social emotional learning as well as some supports. And once we have tried that tier 1, if that doesn't seem to work, then we might work on the next support, which is a tier 2, where we talk about a check in, check out, where they check in with the teacher at the beginning of the day. And throughout the day, they'll have a way to earn points on being productive, respectful, and responsible and safe. And then at the end of the day, they check out with a student. So the teacher, the same person that checks in with the student, checks out with the student, and that forms a closer bond between that teacher and the student. So we try, to have kids work up levels so that if the tier 1 doesn't seem to be impacting, then we'll try a tier 2 support. And then somewhere between tier 2 and tier 3, that's when the social workers tend to get a little bit more involved. We could always answer parents' concerns. And if it's something that seems to be impacting more the home, that's where we're referring them out. But if it seems to be a school-related thing, we'll try those tier levels of support and see what we could do as far as helping them be a little bit more productive and successful at school.
We've been, and I'm sure as Gurnee District and Warren has too, just really trying to give those supports to our teachers, because they're with those students much more than we could ever be. So we have been really doing a lot of trainings and professional development on helping the teachers learn how can they help their students manage anxiety, because we know it's going to be higher this year. And we also have been doing Close Gap. We're going to do it again this year. So it's a program where the teachers kind of have the students fill out like kind of a survey online, and it asks how you doing, how are you feeling, and then it does give some coping strategies that they can practice if they identify they're feeling sad or anxious or worried about something. And it does then give an outlet to, do you need to talk to someone? And usually we have the teachers talk to them first, and then if we need to be involved, we are. So we're doing that. The teachers are also doing community circles, just trying to build those peer relationships, build that comfort level in the classroom. So we're doing that as well. And then they'll be using some second step curriculum just to teach some of those social emotional skills. And that's all at, like Jerry's been saying, like at the tier 1 level. So every student's going to be getting those. So we're really hoping to just build up the teachers' repertoire of ways to help their students in the classroom as much as possible, and to build those connections and community relationships.
I was going to add, both of you have talked pretty much about what Warren does. It's similar, although we don't have a formal advisory class or anything like that. We are focusing with our teachers because, like Tina said, they know the students, or should be getting to know the students the best. And if you're talking about a student who is starting to feel a little bit like they need to talk to someone, a good place to start was with the teacher, building those relationships. I remember Jerry talking about earlier this evening that one of the things they looked at was, if you have a trusted adult, then that's a positive in a student's life. It's a huge indicator on whether or not they'll be able to cope through something. So establishing a positive relationship with students is what we're encouraging our teachers, which we've always done, but kind of giving them a little bit more skill and time to be able to do that, and more permission. At the high school, we tend to focus a lot on curriculum because we're departmentalized, and there's times constraints and classes that we as teachers feel that the content is extremely important, which it is. But as administration, we're giving teachers more permission to be able to do more of the social emotional learning types of activities. In fact, I mentioned earlier that one of our focuses this year has been on the Warren Way, and that's all social emotional learning. And our first whole week of school was relationship building, where we did about like icebreakers. We learned about what the different words are. And there was no curriculum allowed at all for our entire first week. Teachers were focusing solely on building relationships within their classes. So we're going to continue to advocate for that and continue to do that. We're going to continue to do professional development with our teachers to build their capacity to work with students in that realm, because at the high school level, it's a little bit different for them. They're focusing on people a little bit more than on the curriculum. And we definitely have a lot of staff that are really comfortable doing that. But not everyone is. So we're still trying to provide opportunities for them. But it sounds like everyone is in agreement here that you start by talking to the teacher. Encourage your child to talk to the teacher and get to know their teachers. That's a good starting point. And then once that teacher starts to develop a relationship, there might not be a need to involve a social worker, because they have that stability, they have that relationship there. They can go to that person if there's an issue, a small issue like I can't get my locker open, what do I do? Or I don't know what I do today because it's a different schedule, it's a late start, I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go for my lunch. Things like that cause a little anxiety because it's a change in the day, can be taken care of by a trusted person that they've developed a relationship with.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Goes back to that core concept that we know to be true, which is all a child typically really needs is at least that one adult that they can feel confident and trust, right? That seems to make a huge difference for kids. So I have a couple other questions here, but I'm going to be a little bit cautious because one of them is on grief, and I feel like it's probably almost a little bit too big for us to kind of get into at this point. So I'm going to hit you all with one of the last questions. And anybody who wants to jump in on this one, this is a very non-COVID related question. It is really a question that I've asked myself as a parent of two teenagers, and so I'd love to hear your thoughts. Okay, the question is, how often should I really be checking my kids' grades, and how should I be kind of framing that? Now, we all know that there are obviously kids who do need a high level of kind of being checked up in on, but any general guidance on that question of like, how often should you be checking your kids' grades online? How often should you be bringing up, oh, hey, you missed this assignment or you didn't do this? Any guidance from everybody on sort of the best way for parents to approach that? Because let's be honest, when I was a kid, I could mess up all semester. As long as I could fix it by the last day, I was okay. Today, kids don't have that option anymore. So any thoughts on that?
I'll jump in. I like this question. I think, we say that technology has kind of ruined it for people because parents have the ability to take a look at their students like at an hourly basis. To be honest with you, we have our system set up where they can determine and have emails sent home where it'll notify them if the student is tardy for class. So there's so much to this communication piece, and there has to be a balance, because if you are starting to get involved to a point where it becomes where your child is doing fine, but, and fine is different in everybody's vocabulary, right? Everybody's perspective has a different idea of what fine looks like. But you kind of have to develop and think about that on your own, and then think about your student, your child, and what it goes along the lines of relationships and knowing who your child is. I mean, it's a tough question, because now you're looking at whether or not I need to check up on my son or daughter, because there's definitely times when through conversation you're finding out they're not sharing much with you. And if you can't do that and have a conversation with them, then it's a valid reason to look on the school's school information system to find out where their grades are at. And I think developmentally it's going to be different. So I'm talking from like a high school perspective, because with age, different maturity is developed, and also with age, more responsibility should be given as students are given an opportunity to fail. I think Neil talked about it earlier, that failure is not, it's a tool for learning. Failure to a certain extent. Now, failure to a point where you're going to ruin your future, I think that really should be looked at seriously. But failure to learn, in order to learn, I mean, is extremely important. And the feeling you get from that failure, and then the accomplishment that you feel after you have turned it around, is important as well. So I don't know if I really answered that question, but
I think you're being very delicate, but I think hidden within that you were commenting on that the parent's own anxiety might be a relevant factor in this sometimes, along with the needs of the kid. So any other final thoughts on this one about certain guidance?
So I work with the 4th and 5th graders, and this is the time when they are being challenged with more independent work, more homework. There's an increase there. I say to parents, like, it depends on your child. Like, if you know your child has a difficult time managing, completing things, is going to put off and procrastinate things, then you got to look at it more. You have to be checking it more regularly, because what happens is midterms comes up, and then these kids have so many missing assignments that they're just so overwhelmed. They, then they're throwing fits, then their behavior starts it. So I think you really have to know your child. And if your child needs to learn those skills, then you have to figure out a way to try to help them. And, at our age, they're because hopefully then when they get to the high school level, then they are, doing it more independently and learning how to, take a big project and kind of separate it out and do a little bit at a time. Because it's a lot of times parents are finding out at midterms or sometimes at the end, and then the kid is spending hours on the weekends, trying to catch up with stuff.
So Tina, you hit on the core concept of, if it's for gotcha purposes, maybe that's not the reason. But if the parent's using it as a tool to help keep their kid who maybe struggles to stay focused, then that's obviously a really good reason to use this tool. Any other final thoughts on this, keeping up on your kids' every assignment and move? Okay, nothing else? Well, listen, this is probably a good time for us to kind of begin to wind down a little bit. We just have like 5 minutes left. So I was going to try to save a minute or two at the end if anybody had any kind of final thoughts, but I do kind of feel like we're just on to the last few minutes here. So we're probably a little tight on that. Listen, I can't thank you enough, those of you who came here to be on our panel. This is our 2nd annual one. Maybe this will become maybe we'll be looking forward to a 3rd annual. panel night. I do think this is a great way for for the parents and the schools at that opportunity to ask questions, have a discussion about the topics that are important to us. So with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to sign off here in a moment. Again, I want to thank those of you who came and attended this evening and participated. And once again, to our panels, thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. And yes, we'll record this. We'll get it posted on, it'll be posted on the Warren Township Youth Services website. And I'll try to get a link out to each of the organizations that participated so that if anybody wants to link to this, they can. Thank you again, everybody. Have a good night.